The night was colder than usual on the frontier, the kind of cold that made the lanterns flicker as if even fire was unsure it wanted to live. Samuel Carter, a rancher whose hands bore the scars of years spent taming stubborn horses and fighting off rustlers, stood by the fence line with a letter folded in his pocket. That letter was supposed to change his life. He had sent for a bride, a woman who had promised loyalty and companionship through a string of carefully written correspondence. She was meant to arrive on the morning stagecoach, but the moment the wheels screeched to a halt and the dust settled, Samuel realized something was wrong. The woman who stepped off the coach wasn't the one whose picture he had memorized. She had the same family resemblance, yes, but her eyes burned with defiance instead of the soft gaze of submission he had expected. "You're not Margaret," Samuel said, narrowing his eyes. The woman lifted her chin. "No. I'm her sister, Clara. Margaret decided she couldn't come. So I came instead." His heart clenched with a strange mix of fury and fascination. Who did she think she was, deciding she could step into a promise made by another? The townsfolk whispered as Samuel escorted her through the street, the sound of their muttering weaving into the restless wind. That night, as they sat by the hearth in the cabin, Clara revealed the first of many shocks. "Margaret never planned to come," she said flatly. "She wrote those letters because our father demanded it, but when the time came, she couldn't bring herself to marry a stranger. She asked me to take her place. I said yes because I'd rather die under the sky of the West than suffocate in our father's parlor." Samuel stared into the fire, his jaw tight. "You think I'll just accept this?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "You'll have to. I'm here, and she isn't." A sudden knock at the door interrupted them, sharp and demanding. Samuel grabbed his rifle and opened it to find Sheriff McAllister, grim-faced. "Sam, there's trouble brewing. A group of drifters camped by the river, asking about your land. They say you don't deserve to keep it." Clara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What do they want?" The sheriff glanced at her, then back at Samuel. "They claim you're sitting on something valuable, and they won't stop until they get it." Samuel knew exactly what it was, the silver vein buried deep in the canyon, a secret only his late father had known. And now it seemed someone else had found out. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Clara sat awake as well, her hands clenched around a mug of cooling coffee. "If you think I'll run back east, you're wrong," she whispered. "I didn't come here to be coddled. If there's danger, I'll face it." Samuel almost laughed at her audacity, but something in her voice made him pause. The very next morning, they found hoof prints leading across the pasture, straight toward the canyon. Someone had trespassed. Samuel saddled his horse, but Clara was already climbing onto another. "You're not coming," he snapped. She glared. "Try and stop me." By the time they reached the canyon, the sun was high, and heat shimmered off the rocks. Samuel spotted the tracks leading into a narrow ravine, and just as they dismounted, a shot rang out. A bullet clipped the rock near his head, sending shards flying. Clara dropped behind a boulder, pulling a small pistol from her skirt pocket. Samuel stared in shock. "Where in blazes did you get that?" "I don't travel unarmed," she shot back. Another bullet whistled past, and Samuel realized this wasn't a warning, they were meant to die. He grabbed Clara's arm and dragged her deeper into the ravine, heart pounding. The attackers revealed themselves, 3 men with scarves over their faces, rifles gleaming in the sun. Samuel fired, dropping one, but the other 2 kept advancing. Clara, steady as stone, aimed and squeezed the trigger. The man fell, clutching his shoulder. The last one fled. Breathing hard, Samuel turned to her. "You've got the devil's courage." Clara's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Or maybe just a stronger reason to fight than you expected." Back at the ranch, tension grew like storm clouds. Word spread fast, and soon half the town knew about the attack. Clara found herself eyed with suspicion by women who whispered that she wasn't really his bride. Meanwhile, Samuel wrestled with a decision he hadn't thought he'd ever face. Could he marry a woman he hadn't chosen, one who challenged him at every step, yet who had already proven herself braver than most men? But before he could answer that, new trouble arose. A letter arrived nailed to the barn door, scrawled in rough handwriting, "Leave the land or lose your life." Clara ripped it down, eyes blazing. "They won't scare me." Samuel's jaw tightened. "They might not scare you, but they've already taken men better armed than us." That night, the ranch was eerily quiet until the dogs began to bark. Flames erupted from the barn, smoke billowing into the sky. Samuel and Clara rushed outside, only to be met with gunfire from the hills. Samuel dragged Clara behind the well, bullets pinging off the stone. "They're trying to burn us out," he growled. Clara gripped his arm. "Then we fight." He looked into her eyes and, for the first time, saw not an intruder but a partner. As dawn broke, the barn lay in ashes, but they were alive. Samuel knew the war had only begun. Clara, dust and soot streaking her face, stood tall. "You wanted a wife," she said bitterly. "Instead, you got a soldier." Samuel stared at her, and to his own surprise, he wasn't disappointed. He was intrigued. The next day, Margaret herself arrived unexpectedly, stepping off a wagon with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sam," she said sweetly. "I've changed my mind." Clara froze, fury flashing across her face. Samuel's chest tightened with confusion. Two sisters, one promise, and a land soaked in danger. Suddenly the future felt like a storm about to break. Samuel's heart thundered in his chest as Margaret stood on the dusty street, her parasol tilted against the blazing sun. She looked every bit the delicate Eastern lady he had expected when he first sent for a bride, but now her sudden reappearance felt like a dagger wrapped in silk. Clara crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "You left me to face this life alone, Margaret. Now you waltzin' like nothing happened?" Margaret's smile flickered. "You're my sister. I thought you'd be glad to see me." Samuel stepped between them, torn between anger and disbelief. "Why now? After I buried men, after my barn burned, after we bled for this land, why come now?" Margaret's eyes softened with practiced charm. "Because, Samuel, I realized I was wrong. I want the life we planned. The home. The family." Clara let out a bitter laugh. "You want the silver, that's what you want." Samuel froze. Clara had spoken the secret he had told no one but her. Margaret's expression darkened for a split second before she composed herself. "I don't know what she's talking about," she whispered sweetly. But Samuel had seen enough lies in his time to know the truth when it stared him down. That night, the tension inside the cabin grew thick as storm clouds. Samuel sat by the fire, staring at Margaret while Clara sharpened a knife on the table, her movements slow and deliberate. Margaret pretended not to notice, humming softly as she embroidered. The silence shattered when someone pounded on the door. Samuel opened it to find Sheriff McAllister again, his face grave. "Sam, we caught one of the drifters. Says he was hired." Samuel's blood ran cold. "By who?" The sheriff hesitated. "By a woman. Paid in gold. Said she described this ranch down to the last fence post." Samuel turned to Margaret. She paled. "You can't believe I..." Clara slammed the knife into the table, wood splintering. "I can believe it." Samuel demanded answers, but Margaret burst into tears. "I was desperate. Father's debts were crushing us. I thought if I secured the silver, we could all be saved. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. The room spun with betrayal. Not if we turn the fight on them. He kicked the back door open, and they bolted into the night, circling behind the attackers. Clara moved like she had been born to war, her braid whipping behind her as she fired with deadly precision. The drifters cursed, caught off guard. Samuel's rifle cracked again and again, dropping men into the dust. Finally silence fell, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. But when Samuel turned, he saw Clara clutching her arm, blood seeping between her fingers. His chest seized. Clara! He tore his shirt, binding the wound, his hands trembling. She looked up at him, eyes blazing even through the pain. Don't you dare think I'm weak. He almost laughed, even as fear clawed at his throat. Weak? You're the only reason I'm alive. Margaret stumbled from the cabin, pale and shaking. They'll never stop, she whispered. Not until the silver is theirs. Clara pushed herself up. Then we make sure they can't take it. Samuel stared at both sisters, realizing the choice before him wasn't just about marriage, it was about trust, survival, and the future of everything he had built. Days later, word reached them that the leader of the drifters, a ruthless outlaw named Caleb Dorn, was riding toward the ranch with a dozen men. Samuel gathered what allies he could, neighbors, cowhands, even the sheriff. Clara refused to rest, her arm bound but her pistol still steady. Margaret, however, begged Samuel to flee with her. Watching the horizon swallow her. As the weeks passed, the ranch slowly healed. The barn was rebuilt, the land defended, and the secret of the silver vein buried once more. But something deeper grew between Samuel and Clara. They bickered, they laughed, they fought side by side. She was no fragile bride but a woman carved from the same stone as the frontier itself. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the canyon, Samuel finally spoke. When that coach arrived, I thought I'd been cheated. I thought fate had dealt me a cruel hand. But Clara, the truth is, you're the only hand I ever wanted holding mine. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she let a smile bloom without bitterness. Took you long enough, Carter. He pulled her into his arms, the fire of the West burning between them. And though the land would always bring storms and danger, Samuel knew he had found not just a wife but a partner, one who would fight, bleed, and love with him until the end. The frontier was unforgiving, but it was theirs, and together, they were unbreakable.